The story opens on another morning with our protagonist, Shu, sluggishly pulling on his school uniform. His sister Kana was having none of it, telling him, "We're going to be late." Even after all this time since the move, it baffled her how he still hadn't settled into their new routine. Shu muttered an apology, grabbed his bag, and hurried after her out the door. At school, the classroom buzzed. Summer vacation was just a day away. When Shu entered, he was met with a chorus of casual greetings, which he returned before slumping into his seat and pulling out his phone. Then the whispers surfaced again. The weird transfer student, quiet, odd, the one who didn't talk to anyone. He tried to tune it out, counting down one last ordinary day before break, unaware that today would be anything but ordinary. Before homeroom could even begin, a crippling wave of nausea swept the room. A chorus of groans rose as students clutched their heads, bodies racked with sudden, blinding pain. One by one, they crumpled, gasping and retching. Vertigo slammed into Shu, a sickening tilt of the world, as if the floor had slipped sideways. What was happening? What invisible force was attacking them? His muscles seized, his vision smeared, and he tumbled from his chair amid the clatter of collapsing desks. At that moment, a brilliant, intricate magic circle materialized in the air above the blackboard. From its glowing center, a being of ethereal beauty descended, the goddess Ashera. She smiled down at the suffering students and offered her congratulations. All 25 of them, she announced, had been chosen. They were to become heroes, destined to save her world. Shu's mind, clouded by pain, struggled to grasp her words. Save the world? It sounded like a delusion. Ashera apologized for her abrupt intrusion, introducing herself as their guide to a parallel dimension. The students, slowly recovering, stared at her in disbelief. A parallel world? They dismissed it as some elaborate, cruel prank. The goddess explained that the intense headache and nausea they were experiencing were merely side effects of acquiring their new, special skills. These powers, she assured them, were essential for their survival in the perilous world that awaited them. She even told them they could view their newfound abilities by simply uttering the word status, a detail they could explore later. Shu was still reeling. 25 people? The goddess held up a classroom seating chart, pointing out the designated students. All 25 individuals on that diagram were to be transported. She warned them of the dangers and monsters that lay ahead, promising that by overcoming these trials, they would emerge as true heroes. As she finished her speech and began to fade away, a crucial detail snagged in Shu's mind. The seating chart she held was old. It had been made before he had transferred to this school. The class currently had 26 students, including himself. His name wasn't on that list. Did that mean he wasn't one of the chosen? He cursed internally. Nothing was happening to him. All he wanted was to go home. Before he could even process what was happening, a massive magic circle flared across the classroom ceiling. A deafening explosion ripped through the room, shattering the windows. That was the last thing he remembered. When he awoke, the world was a blur of white. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled his nostrils. He found himself in a hospital bed, a man in a white lab coat and glasses standing over him. Shu weakly asked where he was. The doctor, ignoring his question, inquired if he felt any nausea or dizziness. Shu assessed himself and reported that he felt fine. The doctor seemed relieved, but informed him he would need to stay for a few days of observation. Shu's mind raced. He assumed this must be a hospital in the other world, one that looked remarkably similar to those on Earth. He pressed the doctor again, demanding to know his location. The doctor finally relented, confirming that he was indeed in a hospital and that his family had been notified and were on their way. Shu was stunned. This was the largest hospital in his district. His family was coming. Was the whole encounter with the goddess Ashera just a bizarre, pain-induced hallucination? He asked the doctor how he had ended up here. The doctor hesitated before handing him a sealed package. He explained that he hadn't planned on giving it to him until his discharge, but he felt it was necessary. He gave Shu a stern warning. Before opening the package, he needed to prepare himself for its contents, and he should avoid seeking information from the news. Intrigued and a little unnerved by the doctor's solemnity, Shu promised. He tore open the package to find his smartphone inside. Powering it on, he was greeted by a flood of news notifications. He opened one. The headline was stark. Explosion at middle school. 25 students vanish without a trace. One survivor in critical condition. Investigation ongoing. The words hit him like a physical blow. It wasn't a dream. It was all real. The transfer to another world, the goddess, the explosion. But if it was real, how had he survived? It couldn't have been simply because of an outdated seating chart. The entire event was meticulously planned, and he was an unforeseen variable. His mind replayed the goddess Ashera's words, her explanation about the headache and nausea being symptoms of gaining special powers. She had told them they could check their abilities later, but since he was still here, on Earth, he must not have received any powers. He decided to test the theory, just in case. Whispering the word status, he watched in astonishment as the familiar blue system window from his games materialized before his eyes. It was real. Even though he had been left behind, he had still been granted the powers. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over him. Would these abilities lead to his destruction, or would they be his salvation? He didn't know. But one thing was certain. His life had been irrevocably and completely turned upside down. Outside the hospital, a media circus had formed. Reporters swarmed the entrance, held back by a line of police. They shouted questions, demanding information about the lone survivor. One journalist speculated that it was suspicious for only one person to survive such an explosion, suggesting a cover-up by the authorities. The police simply repeated their mantra, allowing only hospital staff to pass through the barricade. A knock on his hospital room door interrupted Shu's thoughts. He gave permission to enter, and the door flew open. His sister Kana rushed in, her face streaked with tears. She threw her arms around him, her small body trembling as she sobbed with relief, telling him how glad she was that he was okay. His father followed her into the room, his face etched with exhaustion and worry. He, too, expressed his immense relief that his son was awake. He gently asked Shu how he was feeling, his eyes scanning him for any sign of distress. A pang of guilt struck Shu. He saw the deep fear and anxiety he had caused his family. He reassured his father that he was fine, that the doctors had found nothing seriously wrong. His father let out a long, shuddering breath, a weight seeming to lift from his shoulders. After his family left, Shu was alone with his thoughts and his newfound secret. He summoned the system window again, studying his stats. The abilities granted by the goddess were structured just like a character sheet from an RPG. He realized that for the time being, his life would be confined to this hospital room. With an abundance of free time, he decided to begin his experiments. He picked up a paper cup and focused his intent on it, mentally activating his appraisal skill. A new window popped up, displaying information about the cup. Condition good, with an additional note that it contained a small amount of water. A thrill went through him. It worked. His eyes scanned the room for another test subject, landing on the wall clock. He tried to appraise it, but the system returned an error message. It seemed the skill had a range limitation. Targets more than 2 meters away required level 2 appraisal. This raised a new problem. How could he level up? In a game, he would fight monsters, but this was modern-day Japan. There were no monsters here. He shelved the problem for later and moved on to his next skill, universal translation. He found a video in a foreign language on his phone and played it. As the reporter began to speak, he understood every word perfectly. The tension made him sweat. It was incredible. He then tried a video in German, activating the translation again. This time, the effect was overwhelming. A violent wave of pain racked his body, and a severe chill set in. He collapsed onto the bed as a system message informed him that he had exceeded his power limit. The strain of translating 2 languages and appraising one object had been too much. But the message ended with a tantalizing promise. New experience points would be awarded soon. The next morning, he woke up feeling disoriented. He remembered experimenting with his skills, the sudden sickness, and then overwhelming weakness. Had he just passed out? He immediately called up his status window, his eyes widening in shock. His level had gone up. From that moment on, the hospital room became his personal training ground. He delved deeper into the mechanics of his new reality, learning its rules through trial and error. He discovered that leveling up also enhanced his skills. He could gain experience simply by practicing, but each use of a skill consumed mana. His mana regenerated while he slept, but depleting it completely resulted in severe side effects, like debilitating migraines and intense nausea. Curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to push his limits to see what would happen if he used his power even after his mana was gone. The result was terrifying. His body convulsed violently, and black smoke-like vapor escaped his mouth. Kana happened to walk in at that exact moment, her face paling with fright at the sight of her brother in such a state. He learned a valuable lesson that day. Managing his mana was a matter of critical importance. After 2 weeks, he was finally discharged. Returning to the familiar comfort of his own room, he collapsed onto his bed, a profound sense of relief washing over him. The official explanation for the school incident was a gas leak, a story that many found hard to swallow, especially given that he was the sole survivor. The resulting conspiracy theories had kept him under a form of house arrest until now. Fortunately, his family didn't have to change their identities or go into hiding, but the ordeal had taken a heavy toll on them. He vowed to himself that he would find a way to repay them for all the worry he had caused. He checked his status again. His time in the hospital had not been wasted. He had been steadily grinding his level, and by the 5th day, he could intuitively sense his remaining mana without even needing to look at the system window. The painful side effects became a rare occurrence. However, he had hit a new wall. His appraisal and translation skills were now maxed out, meaning he could no longer gain experience points from them. A new option presented itself in the system. He could acquire new skills using something called SP. The menu displayed a list of elemental magic: fire, ice, air, water, and earth, each with a different SP cost. It seemed mana alone wasn't enough to grow stronger. He needed to figure out how to gain these new points and level up in a world devoid of monsters. What was he supposed to do? As if on cue, a notification from a game he used to play popped up on his phone. He had neglected it amidst all the chaos. He scoffed at the idea of playing a game now. He already had real skills to master. He didn't need to waste time on virtual ones. After the repetitive days in the hospital, he found himself longing for his old, simple life. But when he glanced at his status window again, his jaw dropped. 2 new skills had appeared on his list: water magic and air magic, along with something called teleportation magic. A giddy sense of excitement filled him. He had new powers to explore. But why did this make him so happy? He realized, with a startling clarity, that he didn't care about the reason. He just wanted to get stronger. The desire to improve his skills, to push his limits, had become his new driving force. He decided to test teleportation first. Focusing his will, he pictured a water bottle on his desk, moving into the trash can across the room. In an instant, it vanished and reappeared in the bin. He was astounded. He checked his mana. The cost was manageable. The potential of this ability was immense. If he could move objects, could he move himself? He stood beside his bed, took a deep breath, and activated the spell, picturing himself in the opposite corner of the room. The world dissolved and reformed in a blink. He was there, an incredible, exhilarating success. His joy was short-lived, however. A violent coughing fit seized him, and a splitting headache made him stagger. He checked his status again. His mana was completely depleted. A single short-range teleportation had consumed all of his energy. It was a powerful spell, but not one he could use casually. Still, the massive mana expenditure had its upside. He had leveled up again. But the sudden drain was too much for his body to handle. The room started to spin, and his legs gave out from under him. He collapsed to the floor, his consciousness fading into blackness. He couldn't move, couldn't even think. The next thing he knew, he was blinking his eyes open to the worried face of his father leaning over him. Shu woke in his bed to morning light as his father, relieved, explained he'd been out for a full day after being found unconscious on the floor. Shu felt a fresh wave of guilt. He mumbled an apology, assuring his father that he was fine and thanking him for putting him to bed. His father, still looking worried, reminded him not to overdo it before leaving for work. Once he was alone, Shu resolved to be more careful. He checked his status and saw that he had reached level 13. His new focus would be on leveling up as efficiently as possible. It was time to experiment with water magic, and the bathroom seemed like the safest place to do it. As he stepped into the hallway, he ran into Kana. He wished her a good morning, but she just shot him a cold look and slammed her bedroom door shut. His heart sank. He knew he had caused her an immense amount of trouble and worry while he was in the hospital. He figured she must hate him now. Shaking off the sad thought, he entered the bathroom, determined to practice without his sister noticing. He activated water magic. A tiny droplet of water materialized in the air, hung there for a second, and then burst, splashing him in the face. He groaned in disappointment. This was not what he had envisioned. He had chosen this skill because he thought it would be powerful and useful, but it seemed he was mistaken. Frustrated, he leaned his head against the cool wall tiles. He had a bad feeling about this. Suddenly, a strange gurgling sound echoed behind him. He spun around to see a colossal sphere of water swirling violently in the middle of the small room, like a contained tsunami. Before he could react, the massive water balloon exploded with a deafening boom that shook the entire house. Downstairs, Kana jumped at the sound. She ran downstairs and burst into the bathroom to find Shu sitting on the floor, drenched in the middle of a huge puddle. He apologized sheepishly, claiming he had slipped in the shower while he was still half asleep. Kana, after making sure he wasn't hurt, gave him a skeptical look and left. Shu wondered if, despite her anger, she was still worried about him. The incident had scared him too. The moment he had imagined a flood of water, the spell had manifested it, consuming a huge chunk of his mana and leaving him feeling weak and tired. A look at his status confirmed a significant drop in his MP. This was another crucial lesson. Through countless more experiments, he began to understand the true nature of his magic. The skills were heavily influenced by his imagination, and the amount of mana consumed was directly proportional to the scale of that imagined effect. By focusing on a minimal, controlled image, he could activate the skills with very little MP cost. It was the perfect method for steadily gaining experience without exhausting himself or blowing up the bathroom again. The process was delicate. A slight miscalculation in his imagination could result in the skill failing or consuming far too much power. But he had found his path forward. He would practice every day, honing his control and steadily increasing his level. Sometime later during one of his daily training sessions, a system notification chimed in his mind. He had reached the required experience threshold. His level had increased. He called up his status window, a grin spreading across his face. It was the first time he had witnessed the level up notification in real time. He noticed that his physical stats had also received a significant boost. He recalled a physical examination he'd had right after transferring schools. His results had been perfectly average. If that was his baseline at level 1, he wondered just how much stronger and faster he was now. A knock at his door interrupted his musings. It was Kana. She hesitantly asked if she could come in. When he agreed, she opened the door just a crack, looking embarrassed. She stammered that she wanted to talk about that morning, but when he brought up the shower incident, she quickly corrected him, saying that wasn't it. Flustered, she told him to forget it and then changed the subject, asking if he wanted to go grocery shopping with her for lunch and dinner. Shu readily agreed. He knew she was still upset about the trouble he'd caused. While he was sequestered in the hospital, Kana had to cancel her own activities to avoid drawing unwanted attention to their family. He decided to put his stat checking on hold and focus on making it up to her for the past 2 weeks. Outside his room, Kana leaned against the wall, her own thoughts troubled. She remembered visiting him in the hospital, finding him asleep after another bout of nausea and fainting spells. The memory of her teacher telling her about the accident at her brother's school still sent a shiver of fear through her. All the news outlets had been ablaze with the story of the mysterious explosion, the 25 missing students, and the lone survivor. In that other world, a universe away, Shu's former classmates stood on a grand dais, facing a beautiful princess named Priscilla. She greeted the 25 valiant heroes, introducing herself as the princess of the kingdom of Sentil. She informed them that from that day forward, they would serve the kingdom in its righteous war against the Demon King. Later, during a training exercise in a dense forest, 2 of the students grumbled about their bizarre situation. One moment they were in class, the next they were being conscripted into a fantasy war. Still, they admitted that having skills in magic was undeniably cool and certainly more exciting than school. Their instructor barked at them to stop chatting and focus. They were hunting low-level monsters today, a chance to test their burgeoning powers. Suddenly, a system notification appeared for the class president, Seiya Amagi. His level had increased. His classmates marveled at how quickly he was progressing, despite having only just arrived in this new world. Amagi, now level 10, demonstrated his newly acquired ice magic for an admiring classmate. The instructor praised him, noting that he was already leagues ahead of the others. Amagi modestly replied that he still had a long way to go. The instructor cautioned him to always be mindful of his mana. Depleting his magical energy in the middle of a battle would leave him defenseless, a fatal mistake in front of a monster. He advised them all to use their magic sparingly. Amagi, a top student even in their old world, assured the instructor that he understood the theory perfectly. The instructor, encouraged by his confidence, rallied the rest of the students to try and keep up as they set off on their next hunt. Back on Earth, Shu had his own magical mishap. He cursed as the river he was practicing beside glazed over with a thick sheet of frost. He'd been working on ice magic, but the sweltering summer heat distracted him, and he overdid it again. Just then, a familiar notification chimed. His level had increased. He was now level 35. 3 months had passed since the explosion, and his progress had been remarkably smooth. He wondered how powerful he could become. Meanwhile, his old middle school was also still deemed unsafe, and all students had been moved to online learning. This twist of fate worked in his favor, allowing him to avoid the scrutiny of a new class and focus entirely on leveling up. His journey hadn't been without its blunders, from miscalculating teleports that left him stranded and mana depleted, to a misunderstanding with his sister while testing healing magic. But now, those mistakes just seemed like funny stories. He was contemplating which new skill to learn when a text from Kana arrived, reminding him to pick up rice. It was his turn for housework. With their father working late, he and his sister shared the household chores. As he prepared to head to the store, he sighed. He couldn't exactly use magic for a simple shopping trip. He didn't have the mana to spare for such a trivial task. Then, a new skill in the system menu caught his eye. Inventory. It sounded like a storage system from one of his games. He spent the necessary SP, and a notification confirmed the skill had been learned. The appraisal ability offered little information other than a storage limit. It seemed he could only store one item at a time. He activated the skill, and a large glowing cube materialized in the air before him. He cautiously brought his shopping bag to the cube, and it vanished from his hands, absorbed into the shimmering space. It worked. He mused that if he could increase the storage limit, this skill would be invaluable. Later, after he left the store and was out of sight, he reactivated his inventory. His purchases, bag and all, popped back into his hands, and the system displayed a list of the contents. After running a few more tests, he confirmed that the one-item limit applied only to single, discrete objects. The mana cost was low, making it a highly practical and successful new ability. As he was walking home, a voice called out his name. He turned to see a girl from his online class, Fujisawa Haruna. She noted that it was the first time they had seen each other in person. Shu's mind went blank for a moment before he vaguely recalled her name. She was their class monitor. She seemed friendly, asking if he was out buying things for dinner. He confirmed, his mind racing. Why was she talking to him? Did she want to ask about the incident? He cautiously asked if she needed something. Haruna seemed to hesitate, then explained that she had just spotted him by chance and wanted to say hello. Since switching to online classes, she hadn't had much chance to interact with her classmates. She apologized if she had caught him at a bad time. Shu felt a pang of guilt for his suspicion. He had only ever seen her on screen, where she came across as a serious and diligent student. He apologized in turn, admitting that he had been wary she might ask about the school explosion. Haruna's expression softened with understanding. She assured him she wouldn't pry, acknowledging that everyone has things they prefer not to discuss. Her thoughtfulness caught him off guard. She quickly apologized for holding him up and said goodbye, promising to see him in their online class the next day. As she walked away, a flicker of something on her wrist caught his eye, what looked like the faint trace of a bruise. A sense of unease settled over him. On a hunch, he discreetly used his appraisal skill on her. The results were chilling. Age, 14. Condition, malnutrition, internal hemorrhaging, emotional disorder. An additional note stated that her perception of information was being altered by factors including violence and threats. The meaning was horrifyingly clear. When he got home, Kana commented on the large amount of groceries he'd brought back. He brushed it off, saying his training had made him stronger. But his mind was consumed by thoughts of Haruna. The assessment results couldn't be a mistake. Her exhausted expression, the inappropriately warm clothing on a hot day, her skittish demeanor, it all clicked into place. He felt a surge of disgust. But he was just a classmate. Without any proof, there was nothing he could do. He tried to force himself to forget about it. Later, he saw his sister sighing sadly on the couch. He asked her what was wrong. Kana explained that her close friend from her kendo dojo, Haruna, had officially quit. She had been expecting it since Haruna hadn't shown up for months, but the finality of it still upset her. Shu's ears perked up. He realized that if his kind-hearted sister was so upset, Haruna must be a truly wonderful person. He asked for clarification on the last name, and Kana confirmed it was Fujisawa Haruna. She described her as strong, kind, and respected by everyone at the dojo, mentioning that she was the class representative at his school. Shu asked if she knew why Haruna had stopped coming. Kana said she had heard there were some difficulties at home. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into a grim picture. Because of the violence and threats, her physical and psychological state is exhausted. The appraisal echoed in his mind. He had to know more. He asked his sister whose turn it was for chores tomorrow. When she confirmed it was hers, he offered to take her shift, telling her she should get some proper rest. Kana was surprised but grateful. The next day, after their online class, just as Haruna was about to log off, she received a private message. It was from Shu. He sent a friend request and a simple question. Did she know a girl named Kana? Haruna accepted his request and replied, asking if he was Kana's brother. He confirmed, explaining that his sister had told him about her. Their conversation was brief. He mentioned he was going to the supermarket again, and she suggested they meet there at 5 p.m., promising to answer any questions he had. He had a way in. He checked the time and hurried out, deciding to practice his skills on the way. He found her waiting for him and apologized for being late. She brushed it off, asking about his sister. He told her Kana was upset about her quitting the kendo club, that she had grown very attached to her. Haruna's expression grew somber. She apologized, saying she knew she had let Kana down. Shu gently steered the conversation, saying he understood it was because of her situation at home, and that some things can't be helped. She looked so utterly dejected. The appraisal had indicated her home environment was likely as bad as it could possibly be. He made an offer. If she ever needed anything, if things became too difficult, she should tell him. He extended a hand, and as they shook, he felt a brief, almost imperceptible contact. That was all he needed. She agreed, and then quickly made her excuses to leave. After he got home, Kana greeted him, and Shu casually mentioned he'd run into Haruna. Kana lit up, asking if she seemed okay. He downplayed it, saying she looked a little tired but was generally fine. He then retreated to his room, his mind focused on the task ahead. He sat on his bed and activated a new skill he had learned just the day before, tracking and search magic. It had two functions. The first allowed him to track any object he had physically touched. The brief handshake had been enough to establish the connection. The second, the search function, gave him a blurry overview of the area around the tracked target. By combining this with his appraisal skill, he could fill in the missing details. He focused his mind, casting his senses out to find her. What he saw, what he learned about the environment surrounding Haruna, made his stomach clench with a mixture of cold fury and dread. The situation was far worse than he had imagined, and he knew with chilling certainty that he was running out of time. He began to formulate a plan, a way to intervene. In the Fujisawa household, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Haruna was in the kitchen, trying to go about her chores, when her mother wafted in, her words slurred by alcohol. She demanded Haruna go out and buy her more beer. Haruna, her voice tight with frustration, reminded her that she was a minor and couldn't legally purchase alcohol. Her mother cursed but dropped the subject. As Haruna washed the dishes, her mind drifted back, trying to pinpoint when their home had become this living nightmare. It had started with small arguments between her parents, escalating over time until the fighting was a daily occurrence. Then, they had simply stopped speaking to each other. Even in silence, there had been a sliver of parental care, or at least the appearance of it. But then, one day after Haruna started middle school, her father left for work and never came back. In the year that followed his disappearance, her mother had completely withdrawn, losing all interest in her children and sinking deeper into her addiction. The responsibility of running the household and caring for her younger brothers had fallen squarely on Haruna's shoulders. Her mother's voice jolted her back to the present, demanding she buy snacks to go with the beer. Resigned, Haruna agreed, adding that she also needed to get groceries for dinner and would be late. Her mother responded with a shrug of indifference. Haruna grabbed her purse, the simple act of looking at the woman who was supposed to be her mother, filling her with a weary disgust. Opening the purse, she found it empty. She confronted her mother, who just chuckled and admitted to taking the household money because she was a little short. Haruna stared at her in disbelief. This was the money her father sent once a month, the only thing keeping her and her brothers from complete destitution, and her mother had spent it without a second thought. Tears of helpless rage pricked at Haruna's eyes, but she knew it was pointless to argue. As if delivering a final, cruel blow, her mother casually mentioned that her boyfriend, Kajihara, was coming over again, and that Haruna should be on her best behavior. A cold dread washed over Haruna. She fled the house, her feet carrying her towards the store. She hated going home. She couldn't impose on her friends, and she couldn't abandon her brothers. She could almost tolerate her mother's neglect. But Kajihara, his presence was a special kind of hell. She was so lost in her misery that she jumped when Shu suddenly appeared beside her, calling her name. He looked at her with concern, noting how pale she was. She forced a laugh, assuring him she was fine, just lost in thought. He mentioned that he was shopping for his sister again, and Haruna managed a small smile. He then passed on a message from Kana, saying his sister wanted to talk to her and asking if she could call. Haruna hesitated. She missed Kana, but the thought of complaining about her situation felt like a burden she couldn't impose. Sensing her reluctance, Shu gently told her that no one was forcing her, but that Kana would be happy to hear from her. He added that his sister wanted to be someone Haruna could rely on, and that maybe she should try trusting her. The word rely struck a chord with Haruna. It had been so long since she'd had anyone to lean on. She promised him she would call Kana and then hurried away. As she walked, she thought about Shu. He was quiet and hard to read, but he was just as kind as his sister. Later that evening, after summoning her courage, Haruna made the call. Kana was overjoyed to hear from her, immediately suggesting they switch to a video call. As their faces appeared on each other's screens, they both broke into wide smiles. Kana chattered excitedly, telling Haruna about a kendo move she had finally mastered. For a moment, Haruna felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in ages. Kana hadn't changed at all. Then, Kana's expression turned serious. She told Haruna that she had heard things were difficult at home, and that if she ever needed anything, she could always turn to her. Haruna was deeply touched. For over a year, she had kept her suffering a secret, afraid of what might happen if the truth came out. But she couldn't go on like this. Taking a deep breath, she decided to tell Kana everything. She began to speak, but Kana suddenly interrupted her, her eyes wide with surprise. She asked about the man standing behind Haruna, wondering if it was her father. An oily, menacing voice slithered into the room. It was Kajihara. He mockingly addressed Haruna as the class president, chiding her for ignoring him. He grabbed her arm, his grip like iron. Fear shot through her as she whispered his name. On the other end of the call, Kana was frantically asking what was wrong, but Haruna couldn't answer. Kajihara, noticing the phone, sneered. He was their homeroom teacher, a man who had somehow become her mother's new partner. He was a vile predator who had infested their home, and his true target was not her mother, but Haruna herself. A fact her mother knew and allowed. He threw her to the floor, her phone clattering away, still connected to the call. He loomed over her, speaking of discipline. Her younger brothers, drawn by the commotion, ran into the room, calling her name. Disgust and despair washed over her. She had to escape, but she was powerless against him. Through gritted teeth, she ordered her terrified brothers to go back to their room, promising them everything would be fine. They hesitated, frozen with fear, until she screamed at them to go. Kajihara grabbed her again, his hands closing around her throat. He told her not to turn away, that he was only thinking of her future. He spun a twisted fantasy of a happy life with him, away from her broken home. She thought of the irony, the sheer hypocrisy of this monster calling himself a teacher. She was so tired, so utterly exhausted by it all. She sent out a silent, desperate plea to the universe for anyone at all, to help her. And then, something happened. A sudden violent gust of wind erupted within the confines of the room, an impossible indoor gale. Kajihara was ripped from her and thrown across the room as if by an invisible hand. Standing in the doorway was Shu. He had used a wind spell. He rushed to her side, urging her to run, telling her there was no time for questions. Haruna, stunned, scrambled to her feet and fled the room without a second thought. Kajihara, recovering from the blow, staggered to his feet and demanded to know who Shu was. Shu's mind raced. This bastard didn't even recognize his own student. The man was drunk, enraged, and murderously serious. A glint of metal caught Shu's eye. Kajihara was holding a knife. With a guttural roar, the teacher lunged at him. Shu reacted instantly, casting another wind spell that sent the man stumbling back. Running away felt like a coward's choice. Kajihara charged again, and this time, Shu used his teleportation magic. The knife vanished from the teacher's hand, reappearing harmlessly on the other side of the room. Kajihara stared at his empty hand, then at Shu, his mind unable to comprehend what had just happened. Shu told him it was over. He'd called the police the moment he heard the commotion through Kana's phone. They'd be here any second. Footsteps sounded in the corridor, and he exhaled in relief. But it wasn't the police. A thuggish-looking man with a baseball bat slung over his shoulder swaggered into the room. Kajihara greeted him as Yasunori, chiding him for being late. Shu quickly used his appraisal skill on the newcomer. The man's name was Hamada Yasunori, 26 years old, with a history of addiction and a criminal record. This was one of Kajihara's unsavory associates. The situation had just become much more complicated. Shu felt his mana levels dip dangerously low, less than 10% remaining. Teleporting the bat was an option, but then he'd be left to face two grown men with his bare hands. He was trapped. Yasunori grinned, hefting the bat, and swung it with all his might directly at Shu's head. Kajihara cheered him on, cackling about breaking all his bones. In that final moment, Shu braced for an impact that he knew would be the end of him, but the impact never came. The wooden bat connected with his forehead and shattered into 1,000 splinters. Shu stood completely unscathed, feeling nothing more than a light tap. He was just as stunned as his attackers. Yasunori stared at the splintered handle in his hand, his face a mask of disbelief. Shu slowly understood. All the points he had poured into his status, all the levels he had gained, they weren't just numbers on a screen. They had manifested as real physical power. His body was now superhumanly durable. To test his theory, he stepped toward the still reeling Yasunori and gave him a light flick on the forehead. The man crumpled to the ground like a puppet with its strings cut. It was just as he thought. Kajihara, seeing this, tried to scramble away in terror, begging Shu to stop. But Shu simply flicked him as well. Moments later, sirens wailed. The real police burst in to find Kajihara and his friend unconscious on the floor. Sometime later, Shu stood outside Haruna's house, waiting. Haruna approached with a genuine smile, the first since everything happened. She said it had been a while, and that Kajihara, his entire gang, and even her mother had been arrested. The investigation had brought all the abuse Haruna had suffered to light. She showed him a photo on her phone of her brothers, now living happily with their long-lost grandparents, who had been the first to raise the alarm once they learned of the situation. Shu asked why she had returned to the house alone. She explained that despite the bad memories, she wanted to graduate with her friends, and had convinced her reluctant grandparents to let her stay. He was worried, but respected her decision. She then mentioned that her abusers were telling the police some nonsense during their interrogation, claiming they were attacked by a monster. Shu knew they were referring to him. Since there was no evidence of his involvement at the crime scene, the authorities had dismissed their claims as drunken hallucinations. Just then, Kana arrived, scolding him for being loud before happily greeting Haruna. She remarked on how much more cheerful Haruna seemed since her return. Today was Haruna's first day back at the Kendo dojo. As Kana and Haruna left together, his sister shouting a reminder for him to hang the laundry, Haruna paused. She doubled back and approached Shu, whispering, "Who are you, really?" He gave her a simple answer. He was just an ordinary middle school student. She leaned in closer, a playful glint in her eye, and whispered back, "Then what happened that day? Is our little secret?" With a grateful smile, she thanked him one last time and ran to catch up with Kana. This was the first time he had used his powers to truly help someone. He had thought that unlike the other world his classmates were in, His world was free of monsters. But that was far from the truth. Almost 2 years passed since the teleportation incident. While Shu was quietly leveling up in his own world, the 25 boys and girls who had been summoned by Ashera were engaged in their own desperate struggle. In the fantasy world, they faced a monstrous beast. A knight commander ordered the tanks forward to absorb the attack, while the mages prepared their spells. They unleashed a coordinated barrage of physical and magical attacks, but the monster remained unfazed. 2 of the heroes, Ren and Ryoga, combined their powers, unleashing a devastating attack. The class president, Amagi, his sword glowing with holy light, struck the final blow, piercing the monster's eye. The battle was won. Later, a grand feast was held in the castle to celebrate their victory over the Manticore. But Amagi stood apart from the celebration, a somber look on his face. Princess Priscilla approached him, gently chiding the hero of the hour for isolating himself. He confessed that he felt the fight could have gone better, that some of their comrades wouldn't have been injured if he had been more effective. Another classmate, Ren, joined them, telling him not to carry the burden alone. They had won, and he deserved to celebrate. Encouraged by their words, Amagi finally allowed himself a small smile. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Shu was perched on a high rooftop, the sprawling night city glittering below him. He had mastered his alienation magic, a skill that allowed him to move unseen through the urban landscape. It had been 2 years, and he was now a high school senior. He adjusted the tie on his new school uniform, feeling a strange sense of unfamiliarity. As he was leaving the house, Shu playfully told Kana how well her new sailor-style uniform suited her, making her blush. He thought with a sigh that his adolescence was in full swing. The morning was chilly, and Kana handed him a hand warmer as they walked together. He was grateful for her kindness, though he would never admit it out loud. His relatively peaceful high school life, however, was about to be interrupted. Walking down a deserted alley, he sensed a presence behind him. A group of thugs cornered him, their leader demanding to know if he was the one who had beaten up Yasunori. Shu sighed. It seemed he had been careless after the Kajihara incident, failing to properly clean up the loose ends. He denied it, but the thug grabbed him by the collar, insisting they knew it was him. A few moments later, the entire group was lying unconscious on the ground. Shu grumbled about them causing trouble on the day of his entrance ceremony. He used a combination of healing magic and perception suppression, ensuring they would wake up with no memory of the encounter. He arrived at school and found his new classroom, relieved to find an empty seat in the back corner. As he settled in, the class began to whisper. A strikingly beautiful girl had just entered. Everyone stared at her, mesmerized. She was like a doll, an angel. Shu glanced over and had to agree. She caught his eye and gave him a small, happy nod, which he returned. The intense stares of his classmates now shifted to him, making him feel incredibly awkward. The boy sitting next to him, Renaro, whispered that their new neighbor was really pretty. Shu hesitantly agreed. The boy happily introduced himself and then cheekily asked if Shu would be willing to switch seats with him. Before Shu could respond, their new homeroom teacher, Himari, entered and called the class to order. She started with self-introductions. When Shu's turn came, he gave a bland, generic introduction about liking games and cooking. Then, it was the beautiful girl's turn. Her name was Kudu. Her introduction was brief and cold, carrying an unspoken message. Don't approach me. Shu figured they were from different worlds anyway. It was unlikely their paths would ever cross. That night at dinner, Kana asked him about his first day. He assured her it was fine, but she gave him a serious look and told him not to get involved in any more incidents. He tried to joke about her being worried, but she just told him to shut up. He promised her that his days of dangerous encounters were over. Later that night, however, he was back on the rooftops, activating his perception-blocking magic. For the past week, since the entrance ceremony, he had been sneaking out after dinner to conduct experiments, testing the limits of his stamina. Tonight, he decided to head towards the mountains. He teleported deep into a forest, marveling at how far he had come with strength to spare. A sudden noise from the bushes caught his attention. He hid, peering through the leaves. What he saw shocked him. There were monsters, real horned demons, and fighting them was his classmate, Kudu. She was unleashing powerful blasts of energy from her palms, but she was surrounded and heavily outnumbered. Shu watched from the shadows, his mind reeling. There were too many of them. He didn't understand what was happening, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. If he walked away and left her to die, he would regret it for the rest of his life. He had to intervene. Kudu was struggling. A swarm of lesser demons, which had escaped from a broken seal, were her initial targets. It should have been a simple cleanup mission assigned by her main house, but she had been deceived. A massive, powerful demon, one of the 4 heavenly kings, or a being of similar strength, watched the chaos with sadistic glee. This was the true threat that had been unleashed. The main house had known and had sent her alone, a lamb to the slaughter. Gritting her teeth, she prepared to use a last resort, self-destructive spell, determined to take them all with her. Suddenly, Shu appeared in front of her. Kudu, not recognizing him, shouted for him to get out of there, but Shu was already in motion. With inhuman speed, he unleashed his magic, freezing the smaller demons in place, then darted through them, kicking and flinging them aside. Kudu watched in awe. His movements were impossible for a normal human, yet she sensed no demonic aura from him. The main demon, enraged at the death of its subordinates, rose to its full height and brandished a massive blade. Kudu tried to get a look at the mysterious man's face, but from her position, it was oddly obscured, as if hidden by a strange distortion in the air. The demon swung its colossal sword down on Shu, who simply raised a single hand and parried the blow. The force of the impact stuck the blade deep into the earth, but Shu hadn't moved an inch. Kudu couldn't believe it. He had blocked that enormous weapon with one fist. The demon, momentarily stunned, tried to bargain, offering him treasures and riches in exchange for its life. Kudu warned him not to listen, that demons were liars and tricksters. Ignoring them both, Shu delivered a single lightning-fast punch to the demon's jaw. The creature was launched high into the sky, where its body inexplicably exploded, its limbs raining down on the forest floor. Kudu stared, horrified and amazed by this incredible, overwhelming power. She wanted to run, but she had to know if this man was human and if he was an enemy. She started to call out to him, but he just glanced at his watch, opened a shimmering portal, and vanished. The next day at school, Shu was exhausted. Renaro teased him for yawning again. Shu made up a story about his wristwatch being broken and trying to fix it all night. The watch had been damaged when he punched the demon, and now it was beeping randomly. As he was explaining this, Kudu entered the classroom, her leg bandaged. She told concerned classmates that she had just twisted her ankle. Shu knew it was a lie. The events of last night were very real. He used his appraisal skill on her again, but it only revealed her physical condition, not her origins or the nature of the main house. Asking her directly seemed impossible. In just 1 week, Kudu had become the untouchable idol of the school, beloved for her beauty, intelligence, and noble background. They were worlds apart. Any attempt to talk to her would surely arouse suspicion. Besides, his perception-blocking magic had likely hidden his identity. It was probably best to just forget the whole thing. As he drifted off in thought, his broken watch suddenly let out a piercing beep that flooded the classroom. Instantly, heads turned. He stumbled through an apology, blaming a malfunction. Meanwhile, Kudu's gaze locked onto the watch. She'd heard that exact sound before. Then, as Shu was packing up, Kudu stepped to his desk. "Do you have time after school?" she asked. Taken aback, he nodded. She slid a note with a location across the desk and said she'd be waiting. Immediately, venomous glares from the boys followed him to the door. Clearly, he had just stepped into trouble. He found the designated room, the literature club, a traditional-style space where Kudu was waiting for him, seated formally. She bowed deeply and thanked him for saving her the previous night. Shu, feigning ignorance, was about to ask how she knew, but she explained. It was the wristwatch. She had seen it on her savior, and the alarm that had gone off in class was the final confirmation. Resigned, Shu admitted it was him. He knew she hadn't called him here just for a simple thank you. She had another reason. She took a breath, looked him straight in the eye, and said it wouldn't be fair to keep hiding the truth from him. Then she bowed, properly, and asked for his help. Demons were nesting in this city. A sealed monster had escaped, and it was hiding somewhere among normal people. She didn't have enough power to take it down yet, so she wanted him to lend her his strength and help exterminate it before things got out of hand. At first, Shu could only stare, like his brain was refusing to accept the sentence. Demons in the city? Kudu didn't flinch. She explained it like it was an old story everyone should know. Since ancient times, demons had existed in this country, feeding on fear they created by harming humans. The more people panicked, the more those creatures grew, expanding territory, multiplying disasters. And to resist them, certain humans awakened special powers. Exorcists. Kudo was from one of those exorcist clans, and every night she fought in the shadows. But this time wasn't a normal hunt. The demon that escaped the seal was powerful, the kind that could turn the city into a nightmare if it started feeding freely. She asked again, quietly, but firmly. Could he help her save the city? Shu's head was spinning. This world really had turned into full-on fantasy, and he was the only one acting surprised about it. Kudu, sensing the hesitation, quickly added that there would be a reward too. She would pay him properly. That part barely landed because Shu was already calling up his appraisal. The system window popped up, and the info it gave him was almost insulting. Kudu, about 16. Nothing else. No hidden truth. No clue. Still, she didn't feel like she was lying. And more importantly, she knew about his abilities, meaning she wasn't some random kid making things up. She was connected to the same abnormal world he kept getting dragged into. So, Shu gave in. He told her he'd help, however he could. Kudu's face lit up like she'd been holding her breath the whole time. Then she hesitated again, like one more thing had been bothering her from the start. She asked if she could confirm something, just in case. He said, sure, and she asked the question that was impossible to ignore. If he really was human, then how did he end up with power like this? Shu froze because explaining it always sounded insane out loud. But after a moment, he stopped trying to make it sound normal and just told her the truth. 2 years ago, there was that gas explosion at his middle school, the one that made the news. People thought 25 students died. That story was wrong. On that day, something appeared, some mysterious being from another world, and gave the entire classroom abilities. And then, everyone except Shu was dragged into another world. He was the only one left behind, the only one who stayed on this side. Kudu's expression shifted as it clicked into place. She remembered the incident. She remembered the headlines. She even remembered how suspicious the whole story felt. She whispered that maybe he was just lucky. Shu almost laughed at how empty that word felt. Abilities. Another world, he said. That's the kind of story nobody believes. But Kudu didn't argue. She admitted it sounded impossible until she'd seen his power with her own eyes. And right now, whether she fully understood it or not, his strength was vital. So, she chose to believe him. Shu actually felt relieved hearing that. He thanked her, because having someone accept it without a fight made everything easier. Then Kudu pulled out the real target. She pointed at an image and named it Ushi Oni, the demon hiding in the city right now. Shu felt a small jolt, like he'd heard that name somewhere before, but couldn't place it. Kudu continued, warning him that their world operated under a strict rule: secrecy. Exorcists didn't advertise their existence. If the public learned demons were real, fear would explode, and fear was exactly what demons fed on. Shu cut in, getting straight to the point. So they had to find Ushi Oni and destroy it before it hurt anyone, and panic started spreading. Kudu nodded and apologized for throwing restrictions on him, but she didn't have a choice. Shu didn't mind. The moment he stepped into this mess, he'd already expected trouble to follow. And if what she said was true, this was something he could handle. So, he asked the next important question. How do you find a demon that can disguise itself as human? Kudu told him she'd already scattered Shikigami across the entire city. They were like spiritual scouts, constantly searching for demonic aura. A yokai could copy a human face, copy a human voice, even blend into crowds, but it can never completely erase what it was. Its aura would leak out somewhere. The problem was timing. Her Shikigami could only narrow it down to an approximate area. To fully track it and corner it, it could take at least a week. He asked her one thing. The moment her Shikigami detected that aura again, could she tell him immediately? Kudu looked confused, but she said yes, that was possible. Shu told her to message him the second she felt anything. Kudu asked what he was planning to do. Shu didn't even have to think about it. What else would he do? He was going to end it fast. And while Shu was calmly planning a quick execution, Ushioni was already out there, hunting like the city was her dinner table. A man sat at a bar, grumbling nonstop about his boss dumping work on him every day, swearing that one day he'd make him pay. Then a girl slid onto the seat beside him like it was the most natural thing in the world. She asked if he was alone too, asked if she could keep him company. She sounded irritated, like she needed someone to complain with. The man hesitated, awkward and caught off guard, but he agreed. Later, as they walked down the road together, she called out sweetly and asked if he wanted to go to her house. The man's brain short-circuited. Is she serious? The girl laughed and said it was rare to meet someone who felt so easy to talk to, someone she clicked with that fast. Maybe they could spend the night together. He barely had time to respond before everything flipped. One second he was in the car, next second she shoved him out like he was trash. He slammed into the ground, pain and panic hitting at the same time. He yelled at her, terrified, asking what was going on. The girl sighed, apologized, and then her body started changing. Not weird makeup changing, not mask slipping changing, real changing, a demon. She spoke like she was annoyed at the inconvenience, saying she couldn't contact her subordinates, so she had to use a rude method to get a meal. The man started crying, screaming that she was a monster. The demon tilted her head like he was the rude one. She stepped closer and said he'd just been calling her beautiful. So why was he suddenly acting so cruel? He begged her not to come near him. She kept walking, smiling, telling him not to talk so coldly. After all, didn't she say they'd spend the night together? She leaned in, ready to devour him. And then she heard something, a sharp sound above. She looked up. Glass exploded from a building overhead, and Shu dropped through the broken window like a falling strike. The demon instantly leaped back a few meters. The man was shaking so hard he could barely breathe, so Shu didn't waste time. He used magic and put him to sleep on the spot. Clean, instant. No screaming, no panic, no witnesses. The demon watched Shu from the side, wary now, deciding it was safer to keep distance and observe. But Shu didn't give her that luxury. He rushed at her with a speed that felt impossible, closed the gap in a heartbeat, and activated spatial transfer. The demon's eyes widened, and the world snapped. They were suddenly high above the city, the ground far below, the air colder, emptier, safer. The demon stiffened, realizing what just happened. Shu looked at her with an almost casual smile, like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. "Ushioni," he said, "I caught you." Not long before that, Kudu had called him, breath quick, telling him the Shikigami reaction flared up in an alley behind the hotel. Busy area, lots of people, bad timing. Shu checked the map and realized it was close. Then Kudu noticed the target was moving fast, too fast. It had to be a taxi. At that pace, she wouldn't catch up unless the demon stopped somewhere. Shu didn't argue, he just accelerated. Wind magic boosting him as he ran down the streets like the city was sliding past him. Kudu told him she'd head there the moment the reaction stopped. They'd meet at the destination. Shu asked one quick thing while moving. That white dove clinging to the taxi? Was that her Shikigami? Kudu confirmed it. Then her voice jumped in shock as she realized what that meant. You already caught up!" Shu answered simply that he had detected it. Then he used appraisal again, and the system spelled out exactly what he was dealing with. Ushi-Oni, 1,900 years old, sealed for a long time, starving, low on energy, disguising herself as a human woman. Most of her subordinate demons had been destroyed. She'd lost her stable supply and her composure. There was also a lesser demon, about 500 years old, using Ushi-Oni's power to disguise itself as the taxi driver. And inside the taxi, there was a human man too, intoxicated under illusion, under a spell that made him feel intense affection toward Ushi-Oni. So, Shu laid it out for Kudu. Ushi-Oni was in that taxi. A minor demon was driving. A human victim was already trapped with them, most likely about to become the first meal. Kudu's voice tightened with worry, and she asked what he was going to do. Shu kept his eyes on the moving car and said first he'd separate the human from the demon. Then he told her to wait at the place where they fought the demons yesterday, because he was going to transport the monster there. Kudu didn't understand what he meant, started to ask, but Shu cut it short. He told her they'd talk through chat. Then he ended the call, even as she shouted for him to wait. Shu didn't stop. He kept watching the taxi, calculating. He could transfer the demon right now, but if she went wild in a crowded area, it would turn into chaos instantly. So for now, he followed, watched, waited for the moment where he could isolate her cleanly, and then he saw where she was heading, an abandoned warehouse, and Shu's expression hardened. This was getting bad. It was time to stop her. He opened the chat. Kudu had just messaged. She'd arrived at the location they agreed on. Shu glanced at the chat, saw her message. "I'm at the spot," and a smile tugged at his mouth. He clenched his fist like he was warming up before a fight. "All right, then we begin." Out in the open field, Kudu stood alone with the wind brushing past her, staring up at the empty sky and trying to understand what exactly he was planning. She had followed his instructions anyway, planting her feet and spreading a barrier across the area, one that dulled a yokai's strength the moment it stepped inside. If this was where he wanted the final battle, then this was where it would happen. She didn't know how, but she was counting on him. And then she saw it, so high above that her breath caught. A figure was there, and he wasn't alone. The next second, Ushione's furious voice ripped through the air as she came crashing down, screaming insults at Shu and demanding to know what he'd done. Shu's reply was almost casual, like he'd simply rearranged furniture. He told her he'd arranged a skydive from 200 meters. "Enjoy the last view of your life," Ushione snapped back, promising he'd regret it, and Shu drifted down after her on wind magic like gravity was optional. Kudu shouted his name the moment he landed, checking if he was all right. Shu lifted a hand to calm her, saying he was fine. And then, without warning, he stepped in and pulled her into a quick hug, like he was bracing her for what was about to happen. He lifted his gaze over her shoulder. Right on cue, Ushione hit the ground. The earth boomed, dust exploded upward in a thick cloud that swallowed her whole. Kudu stared into it, heart pounding, and whispered the question that felt too hopeful to be real. "Is she dead?" Shu didn't even look surprised. He just said no, and he was right. Ushione rose out of the dust like a nightmare refusing to end. Her body, crushed just seconds ago, knit itself back together in front of their eyes. Bone, flesh, everything regenerating as if the impact had been nothing. Ushione's expression twisted in disbelief for a heartbeat, then hardened into pure hatred. She promised to kill him, voice low and venomous, like she'd already decided how slow she'd make it. Shu didn't flinch. He simply lifted his hand, a small smile returning like he'd been waiting for this exact confirmation. "Yeah. Figures. Guess the main boss needs a proper finishing move." Cold flooded the air. Ice magic surged, and in an instant he formed a massive crystal, huge, sharp, and heavy with killing intent. Kudu's eyes widened as she saw Ushione charging straight at him, closing the distance fast. She called out, warning him she was coming, like he couldn't already see it. He waited anyway, 1 step, 2, 3. When Ushione entered the perfect range, when she was close enough that she couldn't dodge without tearing herself apart, Shu released the spell. The strike landed like judgment. Ushione's body split and collapsed, the threat finally cut down for real. Shu stood there breathing hard, the adrenaline fading, the weight of the fight crashing into his muscles all at once. Finally, it's over. That was when Kudu noticed something wrong. She rushed closer, eyes locked on his face. There was blood, thin, bright, running from his nose. "Shu, what is that?" He blinked, pulled up his status window, and let out a weak laugh like the answer was obvious. His mana was gone, completely drained. After throwing out spells that heavy, it wasn't surprising at all. If anything, he'd overdone it, and his body was now collecting the bill. His legs gave out. Kudu caught him before he hit the ground, hands trembling as she held him upright. She apologized rapidly, like this was her fault, like she had dragged him into something he never should have touched. Shu barely managed to tell her it was fine, that he just needed to sleep for a bit and his condition would stabilize. Then his eyes closed. Kiori's voice shook as she called his name, asking what to do, what she was supposed to do now. But Shu was already falling into darkness, and in that darkness, the system chimed in, cold and mechanical, confirming that a unique monster had been destroyed. A bonus reward had been granted. A new title had been obtained, and somewhere in the background, an extra skill had begun developing. When Shu finally woke up, the ceiling above him wasn't his. The room smelled different, cleaner, quieter. He sat up slowly, still foggy, and asked where he was. The door opened, and Kudu stepped in like she'd been waiting right outside the whole time. The relief on her face hit him immediately. She told him she was glad, really glad he woke up. Then her voice dropped, and she apologized again, deeper this time. She said she'd dragged him into danger. She said she'd brought him all the way to this. Shu shook his head, cutting it off before she could spiral. Passing out was on him. He pushed too far, and besides, they were alive. The demon was destroyed. Everything that mattered was handled. Wasn't that enough? That steadied her. You could literally see the tension leave her shoulders. She nodded, quietly accepting it, and said she understood. Shu looked around again, still confused. Wait, where are we exactly? Kudu hesitated like it was nothing, then answered, my house. For a second, Shu thought he misheard. Her house? She didn't tease him or backtrack. She just asked if he was hungry, offering to cook something if he didn't mind her cooking. Shu didn't have the energy to question it yet. All he could do was sit there, still catching up to how quickly his life kept slipping into places it had no business being. But while Shu was waking up in a quiet house, the Kudu clan's main estate was exploding. Exorcists gathered in the hall, voices sharp, eyes wide, demanding confirmation. Ushi Oni has been destroyed? Are you sure? The answer came back blunt and absolute. Ushi Oni's demonic energy, her Yuki, had completely vanished. No trace, no lingering presence. Nothing. That should have been impossible. Ushi Oni wasn't some ordinary monster. She was a supreme demon that had terrorized Japan since ancient times. Even if modern exorcists threw everything they had at her, the best they could hope for was resealing her. Because the moment it became known that Ushi Oni and her minions had broken free, the exorcists had fallen into despair. Their power wasn't what it used to be. Yokai numbers had declined, powerful clans had weakened over the years, and the overall strength of exorcists had dropped compared to the era when Ushi Oni was first sealed. They didn't have enough strength to reseal her, let alone destroy her. So they created a plan, a disgusting plan. They would deliberately feed Ushi Oni someone with immense spiritual power, weaken at her temporarily while she was distracted and recovering, and then force a seal onto her again. The chosen sacrifice for that role was Kudu, one of the candidates for clan head, but politically weak, easy to throw away. They fed her false information, told her lesser demons were the main threat in the area, then revealed Ushi Oni and ordered her to destroy it, knowing full well it was a death sentence. She was bait. She was the offering. That was the whole point. But something went wrong. The reports came in and no one could understand it. According to Kudu's account, an accomplice had killed Ushi Oni personally. Nothing more, no name, no origin, just accomplice. Then the processing team sent photos from the scene, hard proof. The room went silent when they saw the demon's corpse, cut in half. Ushi Oni, whose skin was supposed to be impenetrable, split like she was made of paper. That's when Kudu Genji, top candidate for the next clan head, slammed control back into the room. He said everyone was focused on the wrong thing. Who cared how the demon died? The bigger issue was that Kudu violated their absolute rule, secrecy. She involved an outsider. That was unforgivable. Genji demanded to know what punishment she would face, demanded to know who this accomplice was. And if Kudu didn't include his identity in the report, that meant she wasn't being honest. Genji didn't wait. He called his grandfather and demanded immediate execution. His grandfather listened and agreed that rules mattered, punishment mattered. But then he said something that made Genji's face tighten. Sometimes they needed to be flexible. Genji asked what that meant, already annoyed. His grandfather answered calmly, "A person with power like that, someone who could kill Ushi Oni and still willingly help them, was rare. There was no one else like him. Right now, they shouldn't be obsessed with punishment. They should be thinking about how to establish friendly relations with that accomplice." Genji's expression hardened. So, forgive her? Let her walk? His grandfather denied it. Kudu would still be punished, just in a different way. Her punishment would be constant surveillance of the accomplice. She would be forced to keep him close and report everything. And they would deliver that message to her exactly like that. Genji left furious, walking down the corridor with his jaw clenched so hard it looked like it hurt. In his head, all he could think was how many more times Kudu would irritate him, and how satisfying it would be when she finally became his. He remembered the time he'd cornered her and told her to give up her position as a head candidate and become his wife. He'd promised he'd pamper her as much as he wanted, like he was offering her mercy. Kudu had stared him down and told him she'd decide her own life. She wasn't going to dance to their tune. She told him to leave. Genji had slammed his fist into the wall afterward, swearing she'd regret humiliating him. Meanwhile, in a completely different world, Shu sat at Kudu's table eating the food she'd prepared. The house was quiet, almost unsettlingly quiet. Kudu asked if he liked it, sounding unsure of herself. Shu told her it was good, really good, better than the miso soup at home. That eased her a little. Then, like she remembered too late, she asked if he should tell his family where he had been. Shu said it was fine. He'd already told them he was staying overnight at a friend's place. But then he paused, looking at her. Was it really okay for her to bring him into her house like this? He almost asked about her parents, but Kudu cut him off immediately, saying it was fine. She'd been living alone for a long time. For a moment, her voice went cold in a way that reminded him of the first day of school. Shu caught it instantly. Family wasn't just a sensitive topic, it felt like a locked door. So he let it go. Instead, he asked if more yokai would appear. Kudu shook her head and said, at least in this city, they definitely wouldn't. Shu felt his chest loosen. That meant his sister and his father were safe. He didn't have to keep imagining them getting targeted in some random attack. Then, Kudu suddenly remembered something and pulled out an envelope. She said she almost forgot, and handed it to him as his reward. Shu opened it and froze. It was around 1,000,000 yen. He immediately refused, saying he couldn't accept that much. Kudu didn't budge. If you considered what he'd done, destroying Ushioni, then that amount was honestly too small. And if he refused, it would shame her family. Shu understood immediately. She was the type who wouldn't back down once she decided something. So he accepted it, still stunned, thinking that maybe, after everything unreal that had been happening, he could at least buy something normal with it. His phone buzzed. Connor was complaining that Shu had taken too long. Today was his turn to clean the house. Shu sighed, stood up, apologized, and said he had to go. He started putting on his jacket. Kudu called his name, then went quiet again, staring like she was fighting with her own thoughts. Shu didn't catch it at first. When he asked if she said something, she denied it. Outside, they walked a short distance together. Shu said he'd see her at school. Kudu said the same. Shu turned to leave. And then Kudu suddenly grabbed the hem of his clothes. She looked up at him, eyes bright, like she'd finally forced herself to say the things she'd been holding back. She told him again, more clearly this time, that she was truly grateful. Shu nodded, still a little confused by the intensity, then turned and kept walking. On the way home, Fujisawa's incident flashed through his mind for no reason. Another mess, another danger, another situation that could have ended badly, but didn't. When he walked through the door, Kana greeted him with a stiff, dissatisfied, "Welcome home." Shu paused, wondering if she was angry. He apologized for making her worry, expecting a scolding. But Kana didn't yell. She just looked at him, then called him over with a small smile and said something that hit harder than any lecture. For a little while, it felt like they had gone back to the old days. Kana walked away. Shu returned to his room and sat down, letting the quiet settle around him. From the day everything changed to now, so much had happened. Back then, reality used to be monotonous, something that just flowed past, nothing more, nothing less, a life where nothing special was ever expected. But now, even if it was only a little, that wasn't true anymore. Okay, review time. This is part 2, and also the final part since the story has ended, and it won't be getting new updates. Overall, the story was okay, and it did feel a bit unique because of the reverse isekai idea. That said, you can definitely tell the story flow wasn't handled that well. Things felt rushed, there were time skips that happened too fast, and some of the action didn't hit as hard as it could have. Even the character introductions felt pretty quick, like the story didn't give them enough time to shine. It's not the best, but it's still decent, and honestly, it had potential to improve if it had more time to develop.